Shabbat Shalom, friends. Good to be with you. I know there's still some who will wander in from Torah Talk, but you're here, I'm here. I'm glad we can be together on this Shabbat morning as spring arrives, as we look ahead to Passover, as we have reason to be hopeful. The trees are waking up, the flowers slowly are coming back into color. And here we are, Shabbat morning at the end of a long week. Thank God we can have this time together to learn, to sing, to reflect. And we begin, as we always begin, with a little bit of an expression of gratitude that we're given the gift of a new day, a fresh start. Page 186. Modeh ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam shechazarta bi nishmati bechemla rabba emunatecha. We join in our morning blessings, page 195 at the top of that page. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe. With divine wisdom you have made our bodies, combining veins, arteries, and vital organs into a finely balanced network. Wondrous maker and sustainer of life. One of them were to fail, how well we are aware, we would lack the strength to stand before you. Blessed are you, Adonai, source of our health and strength. Baruch atah Adonai, rofei chol basar, umafli la'aso. Continuing on the following page, 196. My God, the soul you have given me is pure. You created it, you shaped it, you breathed it into me, and you protect it within me. For as long as my soul is within me, I offer thanks to you, Adonai my God, God of my ancestors, source of all creation, sovereign of all souls. Praised are you, Adonai, in whose hand is every living soul, and the breath of humankind. Baruch atah Adonai, Asher biado nefesh kol chai, v'ruach kol basar ish. Nisim b'chol yom has us acknowledge the miraculous in our lives, the miraculous that we encounter over the course of the everyday. And as I've said before, Shabbat gives us a chance to pause and to reflect on those areas that are inherently good, which we can so easily overlook over the course of the busyness of the week. And maybe you have a miraculous moment that you'd like to share with us, some good news from your last week or since we last saw you. Hal?
After the service today, I'm going over to Pennsy to celebrate my great-grandniece's first birthday.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Enjoy. Happy birthday. Ivan.
Personal reflection, but I spent last week, and I apologize for not telling somebody that I wasn't sick last week, that I was going to visit my son in Connecticut, 2 grandsons. And as I was telling Hal, they're just emerging from college and their youth and finding their way in the world. And I personally have a great appreciation for youth, a young person, being able to include me in their influence, in their life, in their discussion. It is such a blessing to be able to do.
Beautiful.
And the return is much greater than the giving.
Thank you for that, Ivan. Goldie, it's good to see you here. That's good news that we all share. For all of the good still to come, we join together in Nisim B'chol Yom, page 198. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan l'segdi vina, lehavchin ben yom uvein laila, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, rokeach ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, zokef kifufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, rokaretz al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamechim mitzadei gaver. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, malbish arumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hanoten liyaif koach. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, ha'ma'avir sheina me'enai, u'tnuma me'afapai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani b'tzelem Elohim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani ben chorin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, ozer Yisrael b'gvura. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, oter Yisrael betifara. We thank God that we can study Torah and live lives of Torah, the ideas of Torah, the values of Torah. And so we join together in the blessing for the study of Torah at the top of 204. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to engage with words of Torah. We do continue now with Chatzi Kaddish on 224. Please rise. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, v'alma tivrach cherutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon u'vyomechon, u'chayetecho beit Yisrael, bagala, uvizman karib, v'yimeru, amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mivorach, Le'olam olam me'almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach, v'yitpar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal, shemei tikudisha b'richu, le'olam min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, tamiran bi'alma, v'yimeru, amen. Lai, 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 lai. Baruch hu et Adonai, hamivorach, hamivorach. Baruch Adonai, hamivorach, le'olam, le'olam va'ed. Praise Adonai, to whom our praise is due. Praise Adonai, to whom our praise is due. Praise Adonai, to whom our praise is due, now and forever. As we remain standing, we can join together on 228 as we say, Praised are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe, creator of light and darkness, who makes peace and fashions all things. In mercy you illumine the world and those who live upon it. In your goodness you daily renew creation. How numerous are your works, Adonai. In wisdom you form them all, filling the earth with your creatures. Be praised, Adonai our God, for the excellent work of your hands. For the lights you created, may they glorify you. Shine a new light upon Zion, that we all may swiftly merit its radiance. Praised are you, Adonai, creator of all heavenly lights. Baruch atah Adonai, Yotzer HaMe'orot. We sing together Shema, page 232. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. We may be seated. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol meodecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom alevavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta ba'am v'shivtecha b'veitecha uvlechtecha v'derech ushachbecha uvkumecha ukshartam leot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot beinenecha uktavtam amzizot peitecha uvisharecha leman tizkeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'tem kedoshim lelohechem. Ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem Elohim. Ani Adonai Elohechem. At the top of page 237, if people fall, can they not also rise? If they break away, can they not return? The stork in the sky knows when to migrate. The dove and the swallow know the season of return. What human instinct knows the time to turn back? What cue sparks the conscience of the soul? We pray to sense this day anew, attuned to the call of sacred living. And here we continue with our song of freedom, Michamocha. We're in this time of year when we're meant to be ever mindful of our freedom. Passover has us consider the story that allowed for our freedom. And so over the course of these weeks, we're meant to think deeply about themes of liberation and exodus and freedom, not taking for granted the fact that we're able to sit as we are able now in relative peace, in relative comfort, and live a Jewish life. Something that was very much foreign to so many generations of our people. We sing together, Mi Chamocha. Mi Chamocha Ba'elim Adonai. Mi Chamocha Netar B'Kodesh Nora Tehilot O Seifele Shira Chadasha Shibechu Geulim Leshimcha Sefatayam Yachad Kulam Hodu Vehim Lechu Veyamiru Adonai Yimloch Leolam Vaed. Sur Yisrael, Kuma B'Ezrat Yisrael, Ufteichenu Mecha, Yehuda v'Yisrael. Go Aleinu Adonai Tzivot Shemo, Kedosh Yisrael, Baruch Atah Adonai, Gal Yisrael. We do rise for our tefillah, beginning on 242. Adonai sefatai tiftachu fi tehillah-techa. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibur v'Hanorah, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'konei Hakol, V'zocher Chastei Avot V'imahot, U'mevi Gula Livnei V'neihem, L'man Shemo B'Ahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshiach U'Magen, Baruch Ata Adonai, Magen Avraham V'Ezrat Sarah, Ata Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechayei HaKol Ata Rav Lehoshia, Mashiv HaRuach U'Morid HaGashem, Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed, Mechayei HaKol Berachamim Rabim, Tolmech Noflim Verofeh Cholim, Umatir Asurim, Umekayem Emunato, Lishenei Afar, Michamocha Baal Givurot, Umito Melach, Melech Memit Umechaye, Umatzmiach Yeshua, V'ne'eman Ata L'Hachayot HaKol, Baruch Ata Adonai, Mechaye HaKol. Nikadesh et Shimcha Ba'olam, Keshem Shemakdishim Oto Bishmei Marom, Kakatuv Aliyad Nevi'echa, V'kara El Zeh Ve'amar, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzevaot, Melochol Haaretz, Kivodo, Adir, Adirenu, Adonai, Adonenu, Ma'adir Shimcha Bechol Haaretz, Baruch Kivod Adonai, Mimkomo, Echad Hu Eloheinu, Hu Avinu, Hu Malkeinu, Hu Moshienu, V'hu Yashmienu, B'rachamav le'enei kol chai, Ani Adonai Elohechem, Yimloch Adonai le'olam, Elohai Yitzion, L'dor v'ador, Hallelujah, L'dor v'ador nagid God lecha, U'lenetzach netzachim kedushatcha nakdish, V'shivchacha Eloheinu mipinu lo yamush, le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el hakadosh. We may be seated. Our prayer of thanks and gratitude, as we are meant to be so mindful of the blessings in our lives on Shabbat especially. Modim anachnu lach, page 256. Modim anachnu lach, she'atahu Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu le'olam va'ed. Tzor chayenu magen yishenu atahu l'dor v'ador. We acknowledge with thanks that you are Adonai, our God, and the God of our ancestors forever. You are the rock of our lives and the shield of our salvation in every generation. Let us thank you and praise you for our lives which are in your hand, for our souls which are in your care, for your miracles that we experience every day, and for your wondrous deeds and favors at every time of day, evening, morning, and noon. O good one whose mercies never end, O compassionate one whose kindness never fails, we forever put our hope in you. For all these things, O sovereign, let your name be forever praised and blessed. O God, our Redeemer and Helper, let all who live affirm you and praise your name in truth. Blessed are you, Adonai, your name is goodness, and you are worthy of thanksgiving. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha ulecha na'eh lehodot. We do join now in Sim Shalom, our prayer for peace, and we do pray for greater peace in our broken world, where there continues to be such violence and pain. The news is heartbreaking as we wake up each day to a war that continues to unfold halfway around the globe. We pray that there might be a greater level of compassion, a greater level of peace, and God willing soon. Page 258. Sim Shalom Tova Uvracha. Sim Shalom Tova Uvracha. Sim Shalom Tova Uvracha. Sim Shalom Tova Uvracha. Chen v'chesed v'rachamim. Chen v'chesed v'rachamim. V'rachamim. Sim Shalom Tova Uvracha. Sim Shalom Tova Uvracha. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Amecha. Sim Shalom Tova Uvracha. Sim Shalom Tova Uvracha. We'll pause for a brief moment for the sake of our own personal prayers. Say shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru amen. Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu. V'al kol Yisrael, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael. We're going to join in our Torah service, and if you were here last night or watching from home last night, maybe you saw that for the first time in over 2 years, we attempted a Hakafa. We processed the Torah through the sanctuary, something that, of course, we couldn't do for a long time, and we did so last night, and so we'll try to do it again today. We'll keep our masks on, and as I reminded everyone last night, we did a little Hakafa 101. First of all, what is the Hakafa? The word Hakafa means processional, and why do we do it? It's meant to mimic Moses bringing the Torah down from Mount Sinai to the people. The ark is traditionally at the highest point in the sanctuary, and Moses therefore brings the Torah like Moses brought the Torah down from Mount Sinai to the people awaiting eagerly at the foot of Mount Sinai. This is not to say I am Moses. I'm just playing the part of Moses in this week's production. So what do we do when the Torah comes to us? We can reach out and touch the Torah with our prayer book. Wish each other Shabbat Shalom. And it really makes, I think, for a nice special moment to be close to the Torah. I think there's power in being close to the Torah. So that's our game plan. We're on page 364. Please rise. Ki mitzion teitzei Torah. Ki mitzion teitzei Torah. U'devar Adonai mi'Yerushalayim. Baruch shenatan Torah, Torah. Baruch shenatan Torah, Torah. Li'amo Yisrael b'kedushato. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo Gadol Adonai Iti Uneroma Shemo Yachdav Lecha Adonai Hagidula Hagibura Hatiferet Echanetzah Ve'achod Kicho Bashamayim U'Baaretz Kicho Bashamayim U'Baaretz Lecha Adonai Me'amachav Yamim Na'aseh Le'chol Le'rosh Al Shlosha Devarim Shlosha Devarim Al Shlosha Devarim Ha'olam Onei Al HaTorah Ve'al HaAvodah Ve'al Gemilut Hasadim. You can put that there. Don't pull off the cover. Ve'al HaAvodah Ve'al Gemilut Hasadim. Thank you, guys. We may be seated. Huge thank you to my helpers. Before we turn to our Torah reading, we offer a prayer for those in our lives in need of healing. Misha Barach becomes our opportunity to pray for those in our immediate and extended community who are in need of healing. And of course, there are so many at this very moment who are in need of healing, who are struggling, who are hurting, whose lives have been touched by illness or by strife. Now's the time we pray for them. And we pray together in the name of their return to strength, wellness, wholeness. As a congregation on this Shabbat morning, our prayers are with Ileana Cohn, Rick Ulrich, Lynn Rumsberg, Jerry Dreskin, Ann Marsden, Sarah Oken, Gary Garnick, Michael Infante, Shirley Friedlander, Jen Jones, Jocelyn Jackson, Eddie Rosen, Mary Mednitsky, Murray Kammerman, Rick Forenell, Todd Pollard, Dr. Jerry Herman, Carrie Basin, Hudson Hodge, Harriet Rosenberg, Ari Sobel, Harvey Savage, Carol Schaefer, Nelson Simon, Jordan Maverick Steinberg, Harold Luboff, Tricia Tepper, Barbara Cohn, Mary Parker, Louis Alahat, Barbara Savage, Karen Bowen. If there's a name you'd like to add to this list, someone for whom you offer a prayer for healing, please feel free to do so now as my glance meets yours.
Farming Prison, Dr. Barry,
Irene Flynn, Audrey Stevenson, Carl Burns, and Steve Burns. Bertha Goldstein.
Our prayer for healing is Misha Barach and can be found on page 371. Misha Barach Avoteinu Mikor HaBracha us the ones before us. Help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misheberach imotenu mikor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Amen. Our Torah reading this week comes to us from the portion of Shmini, which is the third portion of Leviticus. And here we continue in this extended essay on sacrifice and the sacrifices that our ancestors would make, the types of sacrifices, when and why that they would make once upon a time with the assistance of the priests. And in the middle of this portion, and I think this is the piece that draws our attention, we have a challenging anecdote about two of Aaron's sons. So Aaron, if you remember, is the older brother of Moses, and Aaron is given the job of overseeing the temple and all of the sacrifices that will take place in the temple. That's a big job. Aaron and his family. Well, two of Aaron's 4 sons in this week's Torah portion will take it upon themselves to offer up what will be called foreign fire, a sacrifice that was not necessarily ordained by God. And here we could think about already, what does it mean to stray? What does it mean to rebel? What does it mean to have your own mind, your own point of view? What happens when you fall outside of the norm? All of which are fair questions. When they do this, almost immediately there is a very harsh punishment that comes their way, and they quickly meet their end. And then we have the aftermath, which is, first of all, Aaron being silenced in that moment. And his silence could be read any number of ways: shock, sadness, confusion. His silence speaks to anyone who has also experienced loss and tragedy. Sometimes we are simply without words. Vayidom Aharon, and Aaron was silent. And then we're told that we're to pick up these various ashes and carry them with us as a way to remember forever this saga. And the question we might ask is, well, what piece are we supposed to remember? Do we remember them for good? Do we remember it as a cautionary tale? Do we remember the Aaron piece? So there's a lot here for us to think about. I think it's the part of the portion that almost begs us to wrestle with a little bit. Another one of these challenging stories. So maybe that's what we'll do today. So I'll read that excerpt of the portion, which comes to us from Leviticus Chapter 10, verse 1. In the Torah commentary, if you're sitting with the Torah commentary, that's page 800. 800 on the left side, the left-hand column, you see verse 1, chapter 10. For the blessing for the reading of Torah, page 368 in your prayer book. If you want to peek at the blessing, as we say together, Baruchu et Adonai Hamvorach, Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Vaed, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato, Baruch atah Adonai Noten HaTorah. Amen. Vayikchu b'nei Aharon Nadav Avihu ish mitafto v'yatnu bahen eish v'yasimu aleha ketoret. And Aaron's sons Nadav and Avihu each took a fire and put it inside their pan. Vayisimu aleha ketoret, vayakrivu lifnei Adonai, and offered up a sacrifice before God. Eish zara asher lo tziva otam. It was a foreign fire that God had not commanded them. V'teitzei eish milifnei Adonai v'tochel otam, vayamutu lifnei Adonai. And a great fire rose up and consumed them, and they perished before Adonai. Vayomer Moshe el Aharon, and Moses said to his brother Aaron, Hu asher diber Adonai lemor, B'kirvi akadesh ve'al pnei kol ha'am. He said to his brother Aaron, God sanctifies himself before those who are close to him. Echbed vayidom Aharon, and Aaron was silent in that moment. Vayikrav Moshe el Mishael ve'el etzvan b'nei Aziel dad Aharon, vayomer aleihim kirvu su'u et achichem me'et pnei hakodesh. And he said to the other two brothers, go and collect all of the ashes, el michutz lemachaneh, vayakrivu vayisam michtachtam el michutz lemachaneh, ka'asher diber Moshe. Vayomer Moshe el Aharon ule'ezar ule'itamar v'na roshechem al tifra v'gadechem lo tifrimu v'lo tamutu v'al chol ha'ida v'katzef v'achechem. And you shall not mourn your two other brothers, Moses said to the two remaining brothers. Kol Beit Yisrael yivchu et shreifat asher saraf, even as the others were crying in great fear. Adonai v'yamlich v'yiftach ohel moed lo titzu pen tamutu ki shemen mishchat Adonai aleichem v'yasu kedavar Moshe. Let's join in the blessing that comes after our reading, and then we can think about all of it. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. As for our Haftorah, of course we have a Haftorah, which is meant to be further food for thought. That Haftorah this Shabbat comes from the book of 2 Samuel, which is on page 986 in your Torah commentary. And Hal is getting himself ready. We can join in the blessing for Haftorah before we hear the text. That blessing, of course, page 372. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nim tovim v'ratza v'divreihem hane'emarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'Torah u'Moshe avdo u'Yisrael amo u'v'nviei ha'emet u'v'tzedek.
Once more, David brought together Israel's best men, 30,000 in all. Then David and all the people with him went up from Baali, Judah, to take up from there the ark of God, on which is written the name of God, heaven's host, enthroned on the cherubim. They put the ark of God in a new cart and took it out of the house of Abinadab on the hill. Uzziah and Ashio, Abinadab's sons, drove the new cart. As they brought it out of Abinadab's house on the hill with the ark of God on it, Ashio was walking in front of the ark, while David and the rest of the Israelites were dancing before God to the sound of all kinds of instruments of wood, of cedar wood, harps, lyres, hand drums, rattles, and cymbals. But when they got to the threshing floor of the nation, The oxen nearly upset the cart, and Uzziah reached out for and seized hold of the ark of God. And the Eternal grew furious with Uzziah, and God struck him down on the spot because of his disrespect. There he died next to the ark of God. David, distressed because the Eternal had broken out there against Uzziah, named that place Beretz Uzziah, and so it is called to this day. That day David was terrified of the Eternal, and he said, "How can I let the ark of the Eternal come to me?" So David was not willing to have the ark brought to him at the city of David. Instead, David diverted it to the house of Obed-Edom the Hittite. The ark of the Eternal remained at the house of Obed-Edom for 3 months, and during that time the Eternal blessed Obed-Edom and all his family. When David was told that the Eternal had blessed Obed-Edom and all his family because of the ark of God, David went and had the ark of God brought up from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with rejoicing. When the ark bearers had gone 6 steps, he sacrificed an ox and a fatman. David, dressed in a linen tunic, skipped before the Eternal with all his might. And so David and the whole house of Israel brought up the ark of the Eternal with shouting and blasts of the shofar. As the ark of the Eternal entered the city of David, Michal, Saul's daughter, was looking out the window when she observed King David leaping and skipping before the Eternal. She came to despise him. They brought the ark of the Eternal and set it in its place in the tent that David had prepared for it. Then David sacrificed burnt offerings and offerings of well-being in honor of the Eternal. When David was done with his offerings, he blessed the people in the name of God of heaven's hosts. And he distributed to every one of the large number of Israelites, men and women alike, a loaf of bread, fruitcake, and a flask of wine. Then the people returned to their homes. When David went home to greet his household, Michal, Saul's daughter, went out to greet him. She said, "The king of Israel really honored himself today. He showed himself off before every slave girl like an empty-headed lout." David answered Michal, "Before the Eternal, who chose me over your father and all of his family to be the leader of Israel, the people of the Eternal, I shall dance before the Eternal, and dishonor myself even more, and lower myself even more, and yet I shall be honored by those slave girls you were talking about." And Michal, Saul's daughter, never bore a child till the day she died. When the king had settled in his palace, and the Eternal had made him safe from his enemies in the surrounding countries, the king said to Nathan the prophet, "Look now, I live in a cedar palace, while the ark of the Eternal stays in a tent." Nathan said to the king, "The Eternal is with you. Do all that is in your heart." That night, however, the word of the Eternal came to Nathan in a dream. "Go tell my servant David, it is you who shall build me a temple to dwell in. I have not had a temple from the time I brought the people of Israel out from Egypt to this day. I have moved about in a tent and a tabernacle. In all my wanderings with the people of Israel, have I ever said a word of complaint to any of the leaders? I have appointed to take care of my people Israel, that they did not build me a cedar temple. And say this to my servant David, thus says the God of heaven's host, I took you from pasture, from following the flock to be the leader of my people Israel. I have been with you wherever you have gone, and cut down all your enemies for you. I will make your name great like that of the greatest on earth, and I am establishing a secure place for my people Israel, and planting them there so that they can live without having to be afraid nor shall evildoers oppress them as they have been doing. Ever since I appointed leaders over my people Israel to defend them, but I will make you safe from all your enemies, and the Eternal guarantees you to build up your home. For when your days are done and you sleep with the ancestors, I will appoint your child, your offspring, to succeed you and establish the kingdom. He is the one who shall build a temple for me, and I will establish his royal throne for eternity. I will be a parent to him as he shall be a child to me, so that when he does wrong, I will punish him with a rod. I apply to human beings with the afflictions of mortals, but my steadfast love will never go away from him, as I took it away from Saul when I removed him in your favor. Your house and your kingdom shall always be secure. Your throne shall be set firm for all time. In accordance with these words and in accordance with the entire vision, so did Nathan transmit it all to David.
Thank you, Hal. Another very full, very heavy Haftorah for us to consider, for sure. Let's join in the blessing, and then we can talk for a minute. The blessing back on your prayer book, page 372. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, tzur kol amim, tzadik b'chol hadorot. Ha'el ha'ne'eman ha'omer v'yoseh, ha'mdaber u'mkayim, shekol devarav emet v'tzedek. Al haTorah v'al avodah v'al hanvi'im v'al yom ha'Shabbat hazeh, shenatata lanu Adonai Eloheinu, likdusha u'menucha, lechavod u'tifaret. Al hakol Adonai Eloheinu anachnu modim lach, uvarchim otach, yiparach shimcha, b'fi kol chai tamid le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai, mekadesh haShabbat. Amen. So here we have our Torah portion, Haftorah Shmini, a tough portion. This is a portion that, as I said last week, this is not Noah's Ark. This is not Abraham and Sarah. This is challenging to the very end. And within a challenging portion is an incredibly challenging story about Nadav and Avihu. So let's think about these two poor souls, two of the four sons, and we can sort of be the jury. Were they guilty? Did they deserve the punishment? Did the punishment fit the crime? And are there elements of their story that we are almost proud of and could support in our own way? And what about the aftermath? Aaron's reaction, the people's reaction. So what say you? Where can we go with this complicated story? Say that again, Audrey? Why did they do it? Well, that's the number one question, right? Why did they take it upon themselves to offer this foreign fire? So first of all, we could always ask, was there intention, right? That's what we ask with any crime. So did they know they were going astray? Maybe yes. And if there was intention, okay, then what do we do with that? Very sort of purposely breaking the rules. Or were they teenagers? Were they younger and they didn't quite know, they didn't understand? Either way, that question why does exist, right? Why do people rebel? Why do people sort of go astray, break away? What is that? Is that a human inclination? Is that part of our need? Are we non-conformists by nature? Maybe there's some of that there. Were they rebelling purposely against their father, against the community, against God? Has anyone here ever not wanted, right? We've all at times wanted to rebel against authority, parents, God, right? We want to pave our own way. These are all questions, I think, wrapped up in this story and might be questions that go along with the why. Why did they do it? Which is all a way of saying, I don't know why. I don't know. Ivan.
I was going to say, can't direct. The words are very simple. I don't know whether they're simple. I don't know that much Hebrew. But the words are very simple. They simply put fire in their fire pans. But we know, and this keeps coming back to me, I can't get over it. When God instructs you to do it, you
Yeah.
do it exactly the way He tells you. You don't give one drop more, one
Yep.
drop less. It has to be done exactly.
Yeah.
So maybe that was a lesson to be learned.
Yeah, I think
Valuable people over it. I don't know.
maybe I'll even read very carefully the lines in question, because I think it would be good to hear it now that I'm on another page, because you're right, Ivan, that the text is so succinct. It's so seemingly simple. Where was I? Page 800, right?
800, yes.
So let's just see it. Now Aaron's sons, Nadav and Abihu, each took his fire pan, put fire in it, and laid incense on it, and they offered before the Lord alien fire, which God had not enjoined upon them. And fire came forth from Adonai and consumed them. They died at the instance of God. That's it. That's all that we're given, right? That's all that we're given. And I think there is a piece to what Ivan's saying that really does resonate, as we've seen in other portions leading up to this one. We're in the process of becoming a people. We're in the process of coming to terms with what it means to be a distinct people with a distinct identity, right? This is post-Exodus, post-Egypt. We are this new entity that's never existed before. And in order to survive, we have to cling to our rules. We have to be stringent in defining ourselves, both in terms of what we are and in terms of what we are not. We are not those people out there who are idolatrous and pray to false gods and take part in rituals that are unknown to us. We follow these rules, right? So maybe there's a kind of, and this is where we see the Torah maybe as a polemic, right? As having a very clear agenda that if you don't follow these rules, this could happen to you, right? There's a nervousness that we'll lose our way. Hence these very sort of stringent moments. Other thoughts, Hal?
But yet, God gave us the ability for self-determination and to experiment, if you will, in the exercising of our own will and our own brains.
Yeah.
And then He shoots it down.
Right.
And there's such a dichotomy there. I understand that structure is needed, but I also believe that mercy should also be part of that structure.
Beautiful. Yeah, we could take the values inherent in this story, right, of being part of the community, of aligning ourselves with a set of rules, of buying into a set of values, and pit them against a whole other grouping of values that we also love, which is forgiveness, patience, compassion. Where's all that stuff in this story? And as for what you were saying about we have free will and we have creativity and this is what it means to be a human being, right? You're speaking like a modern Reformed Jew, right? And some of us were in my class that I did this week in my Judaism 101. We talked about, specifically this week, we talked about the history of the Reform movement and how the Reform movement really came about after the French Revolution. The world was changing, right? The Reformation, emancipation, all these notions that actually we as human beings, we have free will, we have creativity, we believe in art, free thinking, philosophy, that we shouldn't ignore these items in our Judaism. That's what the Reform movement was about, really. Exploration and creativity, and that our architecture should reflect that, our music should reflect that. And the first Reformed synagogue, 1818 in Germany, took us boldly in that direction. But until then, all that was nonsense, right? It was all about, you're part of these people, here are the commandments, this is what we do. And for a great many Jews to this day, that's the case. This is what we wear, this is what we eat, this is where we live. These are the rules we follow. Free expression is something that is shunned. So, other thoughts? Nadav and Avihu? Ivan?
It came to me while I was reading it that the celebration that was being prepared, they were describing this whole sacrifice because the people were to visualize God, who was going to present himself to them, that this was an important distraction from that major purpose. God, this was a special occasion, and they distracted from it.
Yeah. Maybe that's it. Other commentators have noted that maybe they're trying to imitate Egyptian cult practices, right? That this is what they knew, this is what they grew up with, this is all that's familiar to them, and this is God saying, once and for all, forget all that you learned and saw in Egypt. There's a new way now. Maybe there's a bit of that. It's a tragic story. It is a painful story. And I maybe we're meant to side with Nadav and Avihu, right? A lot of us know teenagers, live with teenagers, we all were teenagers. Part of what it means to be a kid is to explore, to make mistakes, to learn tough lessons sometimes. I feel for Aaron and certainly for the two boys. Hal?
But I guess the thing is there were sacrifices made. The ones that followed God's plan. Here they were. It's not like they were sacrificing something that was possibly abnormal.
Right. That's right.
You're talking about they were sacrificing incense.
And let's remember the story that we read about just about a month ago. I mean, you want to talk about a false god? Look at what their dad did.
Right.
A golden calf that all the people came and paraded around and prayed to. And Aaron seems to be sitting pretty still. Right? So talk about injustice, contradiction. I mean, I would say, and maybe there's an irony here, in a book about sacrifice, Nadav and Avihu become the ultimate sacrifice. They are sacrificed in the name of the people learning a lesson. Very harsh lesson. And it doesn't sit well with us. Larry?
Yes, I would love to link to the Torah now. It gives us also a tragic situation with Uzzah. I mean, from looking at it, he was just trying to keep the thing from falling. But there's obviously more to it than that.
The parallel with the Haftorah, we've said this so many times over the years, that sometimes it's a little bit murky, and sometimes it's blatantly obvious why this Haftorah is paired, and here it's so obvious, and also so striking. I think if nothing else, the fact that we see the names Nadav and Avihu take on such popularity in Israeli culture, in Israeli history, I know various people with those names, tells us something about Jewish life and Israeli life. That between a God who's absolutely stringent and forces us to walk a line, and these boys who have the chutzpah to have their own mind and their own sense of creativity and expression, it feels like we as a people, at least here, we're aligning ourselves with the boys. And it can't be all or nothing. I think that, as is so often the case, the right answer is somewhere in the middle. You can't be all conformity, turn off your mind, follow blindly, nor can you make everything up as you go, not take any cues from your texts, from your elders, from your community, be a lone wolf, be a rebel. That's the path of fanaticism. The answer is somewhere in the middle, I would think.
Isn't it the two words
Yeah, keva is, the prescription of how we do things, right? We bow here, we bow there, we say these words at this time, we eat these foods at this time. Keva is, it really means fixed. We use the word when we affix a mezuzah. That's how the prayer is, that God commands us to affix the mezuzah. Kavanah is about intention. Bringing our own spirit, bringing our own creativity, bringing our own self. Right? And we're meant to come to prayer with both keva and kavanah. And perhaps with everything else. So why don't we end it there, at least for now. Ivan, last word.
The Yiddish always has it right on the minute. There's a saying, "Es ist schwer zu sein a Yid." It's very hard to be a Jew. And if you don't have the problems, they'll show you you've got problems. And all I can say is, after 89 years, you just have to keep learning as best you can. If you learn more, you understand a little better. And that's about as far as you can get.
It's very hard to be a Jew, right? We're punished for following blindly, and we're punished for not following blindly. So, Ivan, I think the quote rings very true. So why don't we move forward with our service? We're going to return our Torah. We're going to move to the conclusion of our service after another fruitful conversation. We are picking it up as we return the Torah to the Ark on page 370 for those who would like to follow along. And I'll ask you to please rise, and my helpers, if you're up for it, I'd love to have you back here. Okay, guys. Vezot Torah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai v'yad Moshe. Al shlosha divarim, al shlosha divarim, ha'olam omed. Al haTorah, ya ha'avodah, al gemilut chasadim. Al haTorah, al ha'avodah, al gemilut chasadim. Eitz chaim hi, v'machazikim ba. You guys can do the cover. Om heha meushar derachecha cheinoam v'chol netivoteha shalom hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva. Can you help? Chadesh yameinu li'ad kekedem. Now let's open the ark. Good. We're going to join in Aleinu at the bottom of 586. Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol, latetz gedula liotzer bereshit, shelo asanu kikoyei haratzot, v'lo samanu kamishpechot adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, v'goralenu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim umishtachavim umodim, Livnei Melech Malchei Hamlachim Hakadosh Baruch Hu V'ne'emar V'haya Adonai L'melech al kol ha'aretz Bayom hahu Yeh Adonai echad U'shemo echad. Thank you, guys. Good. can remain standing for another moment as our thoughts turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every race and every nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, life and death, and we do recall now those taken from our congregational community in most recent days, including Star Berkowitz, mother of Wendy Cohen, and Robert Weiner, brother of Rabbi Nathan Weiner. As well, we recall at this time those whose yahrzeit we mark this Shabbat. Richard Chaikin, Israel Duchovny, Esther Feldman, Michael Feldman, Adele Flair, Jenny Friedman, Julia Krantz, Neil Lustig, Frank Malamud, Jerry Parker, Lena Pomerantz, Michael Portnoy, Mildred Schaefer, Philip Smith, and Mary Sorolovitz. If there's a name you'd like to add to this list, someone for whom you say Kaddish this Shabbat, feel free to do so now.
Emmanuel Noble, Kelly Noble, Miriam Noble,
Stan Lynn, Hannah Summers, and Micah Summers.
We join together in the hallowed words of Kaddish Yatom, the mourner's Kaddish, page 598. Yitgadav Yitkadash Shemei Rabbah, Bialma Divra Chirutei V'Yamlich Malchutei, B'chayechon U'Vyomechon U'Chayei D'chol Beit Yisrael, B'Agalav V'Zman Kariv Yimru, Yehei Shemei Rabbah Mivarach Le'olam U'Omei Almaya, Yiparak V'Yishtabach V'Yipa'ar V'Yitraman V'Yitnaseh, Yitadar V'Yitaleh V'Yitalal Shemei D'Kudisha Barichu, Leila Min Kol Birchata V'Shirata, Tushbechata V'Nechemata, Damiran Bi'alma V'Imru, Yehi Shlomo Rabba Min Shemaya, V'Chayim Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael, V'Imru, Amen. Oseh Shalom B'Mromav, Hu Yaseh Shalom, Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael, V'Imru, Amen. We may be seated. As always, join us for our Kiddush immediately following. Today's Kiddush brought to you by Ivan. Thank you, Ivan. Other news and notes. I know Sisterhood has their chocolate Seder. That's coming up. What else can we share? We have Passover, of course, on the horizon. And stay tuned for what Ritual might be providing and how we're going to maybe help to sweeten your Seder experience. Passover is really not too far off now. Other announcements, large or small?
I wanted to ask if you want to donate to the Ukrainian resuscitation.
Yep.
Where do you go?
Good. So if you want to give tzedakah to the Ukraine, one very good way to do it online, it's WUPJ.org. That stands for World Union of Progressive Judaism. I can write it down for you when we leave. That's the international body of the Reform movement, and they're sending donations to the Jewish community of the Ukraine. That's one place to go. There are others that I can tell you about, but that's where I've been directing everyone. WUPJ.org. Because there's a massive Jewish population in the Ukraine, even still. So that's where we are. As always, it's great to be with everyone. I hope you have a great day. I hope you have a great weekend. How about a closing song? What do we think? Jacqueline? What is it? Lecha Dodi? Jacqueline, if you want Lecha Dodi, we are going to sing Lecha Dodi. What tune do you know the best? There's a million tunes of Lecha Dodi. What's the one that we do with the choir? How about that? What's the one that you guys sing with the choir? Can you remember? Do you know one that goes Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala? Page 138. P'nei Shabbat nekabela, Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala. P'nei Shabbat nekabela, Lecha Dodi Lecha dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor v'zachor b'dibor echad, Hishmianu el hamiuchad, Adonai echad, U'shemo echad, L'shem u'tiferet v'letila. Lecha dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, Ki hi mikor haberacha, Me'erosh mikedem nisucha, Sof ma'aseh b'machshava tchila. Lecha dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. How was that, Jacqueline? Thumbs up. Shabbat Shalom, friends. Zachor b'diboreh,